The text lit up my phone in the middle of a pitch meeting. We were 23 slides into a $12 million security proposal when my screen vibrated against the table. I wouldn't have looked. Normally, I've trained myself to block out distractions, to stay buttoned up and steel-faced in front of venture partners and boardroom sharks. But something about that alert drew my eyes. It was from Silas. Just 2 words. Dad, come quick. My stomach dropped. Silas wasn't the kind of kid to cry wolf. 17 years old, quiet, disciplined, captain of the track team, practically allergic to drama. The last time he used the word quick was when he broke his arm and still tried to bike himself to urgent care. My throat tightened. I stood mid-sentence, shut my laptop, muttered an apology, and walked straight out of that room. My phone rang before I even hit the parking lot. Silas, breathless and panicked. It's Mom. You need to come now. There's something wrong. Then he hung up. That was all I had to go on. My mind kicked into overdrive. I peeled out of the parking garage and tore through Boston traffic like a man possessed, running red lights I didn't even register, praying a cop would pull me over just so I could say, "Follow me." By the time I turned onto our street, the blue and red lights were already flashing like a nightmare in real time. 2 cruisers. One unmarked black sedan. An ambulance idling with its back doors flung open. My neighbors were gathered across the street, some whispering, some filming. The moment I slammed the car into park and bolted toward the house, I saw Silas. He was running, stumbling toward me from the front steps, his face contorted in a way I had never seen. My son, the Rock, the one who didn't flinch at a broken bone, was crying. Real, raw sobs that shook his chest. "Dad," he gasped, grabbing my sleeve. "It's Mom. She's been hiding something. It's bad. It's really bad. There's someone in her room." I didn't stop to ask. I pushed past the paramedics and officers at the door and stormed inside. I could hear Mira crying upstairs, my 20-year-old daughter, somewhere between fury and shock. The living room looked untouched, pristine. Same with the kitchen. Everything was normal. That made it worse. It made it feel like the house itself was lying to me. I took the stairs 2 at a time and reached the master bedroom, where 2 officers stood guard. One of them tried to stop me. I showed him my badge, the Renshield Company ID still clipped to my shirt, and said, "That's my house. That's my wife's room." He didn't argue. Just opened the door. Camilla's room was just as I'd seen it the night before. Flawless. Her skincare lined up like soldiers on the vanity. The bed perfectly made, her perfume lingering in the air, orange blossom and quiet poison. But then I saw it. The closet door was ajar, and behind it, Silas's sneakers. He must have been the one who found it. My hands moved before my thoughts could catch up. I stepped inside the closet, feeling along the far wall. There was a click, faint but distinct, and a panel shifted inward. A hidden compartment. I had lived in this house for 13 years and never knew it existed. Inside that compartment was a space no wider than a refrigerator, and in it was a body, curled forward, knees drawn toward chest. Pale. Lifeless. A single dark hole over the heart. I staggered back. My lungs forgot how to breathe. The man's face was bloated, but recognizable. Elias Marlowe. I'd seen him a dozen times over the years, always friendly, always quick with a handshake and stories about business ventures I didn't care enough to question. Camilla always brushed him off as an old college friend, someone she co-founded a nonprofit with. I'd never liked the guy. Something about his laugh, too polished, too rehearsed. And now he was here, dead, hidden inside my wife's wall. I turned, and that's when the officer who had followed me into the room said, "Sir, we're going to need you to step back downstairs. There's more." I followed numbly, my hands shaking. I found Mira sitting on the bottom step, clutching her phone, face blotchy with tears. I crouched in front of her and whispered, "Where's your mother?" She didn't answer. An officer in plain clothes pulled me into the kitchen. He laid out a clear evidence bag on the table. Inside were passports. 5 of them, all with different names, all with Camilla's face. A second bag held a stack of foreign currency and 2 burner phones. "We also found a suppressed pistol under the floorboards," he added. My mouth went dry. My wife, the woman I'd slept beside for 22 years, had an escape kit like a fugitive. "And you don't know where she is?" he asked again. I stared at the kitchen window, where the reflection of my face looked too pale, too blank. "No," I said slowly. "I thought she was home." That was the moment it hit me, not just the fear or the betrayal, but the sheer scale of what I didn't know. I had built a career in security, in threat detection, and high-level surveillance. And the greatest threat of all had been under my roof, whispering goodnight and stirring my coffee with a smile. I felt something inside me tighten. Not just dread. Something sharper. Purpose. Camilla wasn't just missing. She was hiding. And I was going to find her. The master bedroom was immaculate too immaculate. Camilla always kept it that way. Crisp white duvet, no clutter on the nightstand, the scent of lavender sachets tucked in every drawer. But now, standing in the center of that room with 2 police officers and the echo of my daughter's sobs ringing from downstairs, everything about that order felt ominous. Like someone had cleaned up to erase something. I glanced around, looking for signs, anything out of place. But everything was perfect, except for the closet door. It was open. Slightly ajar. Just enough to feel deliberate. Mira stood frozen by the entrance, arms crossed tightly over her chest. She looked like she'd aged 5 years in the last 5 hours. Her cheeks were streaked with dried tears, and her voice was barely above a whisper when she said, "Dad, you need to see it." Beside her, Silas kept his eyes fixed on the floor, jaw clenched so tightly the muscles twitched under his skin. I nodded once and stepped past them. Inside the walk-in closet, the faint scent of Camilla's perfume still hung in the air. Vanilla and something sharper, sandalwood maybe. I used to find it comforting. Now it made me sick. I swept my hands along the back wall. I didn't know what I was looking for, just that there had to be something. I crouched low, inspecting the baseboards, then straightened and ran my palm across the upper panels. That's when I heard it, a subtle click beneath my fingers. I pressed again. The panel gave way, swinging inward on a hidden hinge, revealing a narrow hollow space behind the closet wall. It was barely large enough to crouch inside. The air was stale, and in the dim light that seeped through from the closet, I saw him. Elias Marlowe. His body slumped against the wall, knees drawn up like he'd been stuffed there without care. His skin had gone that pale, waxy color that only comes after death has settled in. A bullet hole in the center of his chest told the story in one sentence. I stepped back instinctively, the coppery scent of blood and old air hitting me all at once. For a moment, the world tilted, my vision tunneling. Then Mira gasped behind me. "Is that?" She couldn't finish. "Yes," I said quietly, my voice catching. "It's him. Elias. Camilla's so-called harmless friend. Her business partner. The man she always swore was just a colleague from her nonprofit days. She never looked me in the eye when she said it. I always thought it was awkwardness. Now I saw it for what it was, a lie. A carefully maintained lie, stacked on top of others I hadn't even begun to uncover. I backed out of the closet and called for the officers. They moved quickly, one securing the scene while the other radioed for a forensics unit. Within minutes, the house became a hive of whispered commands and gloved hands. While they worked, I paced the edge of the room. I couldn't sit still. My mind was unraveling piece by piece. The marriage, the conversations, the Thursday nights when Camilla insisted I go play poker with my coworkers. Every week, without fail. I used to think she just needed alone time. I never questioned it. I was an idiot. My phone buzzed in my pocket. A message from my company's senior analyst. Security logs accessed. Alert. Suspicious data scrub on master bedroom camera feed last 4 Thursdays. My breath caught. I'd installed windshield cameras in every corner of that house. Partly for safety, partly for paranoia I'd long ago buried under domestic routine. Camilla had scrubbed the feeds. Deliberately. Skillfully. Which meant this wasn't a panic kill. It was planned. I went back downstairs, needing to be in motion. The lead detective met me in the kitchen. His face was unreadable as he slid a plastic evidence bag across the table. "We found these hidden in a ceiling vent," he said. Inside were 2 Nigerian passports, 1 Croatian, and 2 Canadian. All with different names. All with Camilla's face. Next to that, a stack of cash, easily 50,000 in mixed currency, and 2 burner phones. "This looked like something your wife would normally have lying around?" he asked. My laugh came out hollow and bitter. "No," I said. "But clearly, I don't know what's normal anymore." He sat across from me, elbows on the table. "Sir, we're trying to understand what happened here. Was Elias Marlowe a threat to your family? Did you know he had a criminal record sealed by the DOJ?" I blinked. "No. He was a friend. At least, that's what I was told." The detective didn't respond. Just tapped the evidence back. "This doesn't look like a misunderstanding. This looks like a professional setup. And people like Marlowe don't just end up dead in walls unless something's gone seriously off script." I didn't say it aloud, but the word echoed in my skull. Professional. I walked out to the porch. Mira and Silas sat together on the steps now, silent. Mira leaned her head on his shoulder, and he let her. They looked broken. I crouched in front of them, trying to smile, but it probably came out more like a wince. I'm gonna find out what's going on, I said. But for now, I need you two to stay here. Talk to the officers. Don't answer any questions from reporters. Don't go near Mom's room. Understood. Mira nodded. Silas didn't. I turned back to the officers. She's not at work, one of them said. We've checked. We sent units to her nonprofit downtown. She hasn't been in all week. My heart thudded. Do you have any idea where she might have gone? The detective sighed. Right now? No. But a woman with this kind of prep, cash, passports, surveillance blind spots? She didn't just vanish. She went dark. And that means she planned for this. That was the part that made my throat tighten the most. She didn't run because she panicked. She ran because something told her it was time. Like she'd been waiting. Like everything had been in motion long before I ever knew it. And the worst part was, I had no idea how much of our life, our home, our children, had been part of that plan. I didn't sleep that night. While Mira and Silas stayed in the guest room under officer supervision, I spent the hours between midnight and sunrise in front of my laptop, combing through every scrap of data our home security system had captured over the last 3 months. I built Rindshield to be near impossible to fool. It could track motion with heat signatures, run facial recognition across private archives, and store footage on decentralized servers. It wasn't perfect, but it was mine. And somehow, Camilla had moved through it like a ghost. She left no digital trace. No heat signatures in the hallway when she entered the bedroom. No sound alerts from the concealed door. It was like she'd found a way to exist just outside the frame. But I knew she couldn't erase everything. Nobody's that good. Not even her. At 2:17 a.m., I found my first thread to pull. A routine status log, nothing more than a system ping, showed the main bedroom camera going offline every Thursday between 6:45 p.m. and 8:30 p.m. for the last 7 weeks. Always when I was out for poker night with the guys from work. Camilla had always been the one who encouraged those nights. You need to unwind, she'd say, pressing a kiss to my cheek as she handed me my keys. Meanwhile, she was erasing entire evenings. 7 weeks. That was the pattern. I cross-referenced her car's GPS from our insurance app. The tracker wasn't one she would have thought to check. It was built into our vehicle policy. The last signal? A motel on the edge of I-93. The kind of place where no one asks questions. Where cash is king and silence is part of the rate. I stared at the pin on the screen, my jaw clenched. That was where she'd gone. Repeatedly. I thought of Silas's text, his tear-streaked face, the body in the wall. My hands trembled as I typed a few lines of code into a device only a few at Rindshield knew existed. A microsurveillance sniffer I kept for black-site engagements. If Camilla's phone was still live, I could ghost its signal. The screen pulsed once. Then again. And there it was, a soft green dot on the map. Her phone. Still on. Still transmitting. Still at that same motel. She was hiding, but not smartly. Maybe she thought no one would look there. Maybe she didn't care anymore. Or maybe she wanted me to find her. I didn't tell the officers. Not yet. I didn't trust the process, not when every minute counted. I left Mira and Silas in the care of the 2 detectives still posted outside. Swore I'd be back before sunrise. I couldn't promise more than that. I kept my grip steady on the steering wheel as I drove, headlights cutting through the rain like blades. Every part of my body was alert, focused. But under that precision, there was a thrum of betrayal so loud I could feel it in my teeth. I had built my life on control, on anticipating problems before they happened. I secured tech firms and government vaults with better protection than most banks. I trained my mind to think 10 steps ahead. But somehow, Camilla had gotten past all of it. She had slipped beneath my defenses, into my home, into my children's lives, and built something I hadn't seen until it was too late. The motel was a low-slung strip of gray rooms and flickering neon. Room 212, according to the tracker. I parked down the block and approached on foot. My jacket clung to my back in the cold drizzle. My hand hovered near the Glock I kept in my glove compartment. I didn't know what I was walking into, but I wasn't going in blind. I never went in blind. I knocked twice. Nothing. I waited, listening. Then knocked again, this time louder. There was a shuffle behind the door, then the deadbolt clicked. When she opened it, I saw her. Camilla. My wife. At least, the woman who had played the part for 2 decades. Her hair was pulled back, No makeup, eyes wide not with fear, but calculation. She didn't scream, didn't flinch. She just stared at me like she was trying to guess which version of Marcus I'd brought with me. "Marcus," she said quietly. "How did you find me?" "I build security systems for a living," I replied, stepping past her before she could protest. "You really thought you could hide?" The room was dim and smelled like cheap soap and burnt coffee. The bed wasn't slept in. A duffel bag sat on the table, half open. Inside, passports, money, a loaded Glock, and something else, Elias's ID, clipped and worn. The name, still legible, Elias Marlowe. She closed the door softly behind me. "You shouldn't be here." "No," I said, turning toward her. "You shouldn't have been in my life at all." She winced at that. For a moment, I thought maybe, just maybe, some part of her felt something. Then she sat on the edge of the bed and spoke like someone switching roles mid-performance. "I didn't kill him," she said. "If that's what you think. I didn't kill Elias." "Then who did?" I demanded. "Because he's dead in our house. In your room. And the kids found him." She looked away, her voice low. "They were cleaning up. The Grove. That's what they do when an asset becomes a liability. They eliminate." Silas was never supposed to find the compartment. I crossed my arms. "The Grove." She looked up. "It's who I worked for. Who I've always worked for." "You were the assignment, Marcus. The marriage, the kids, it started as a mission. I was planted. Elias was my handler." The words didn't make sense, not at first. They bounced off the walls of my skull, crashing against memories I didn't want to re-examine. But then the details started to align. The inexplicable silences. The network of contacts she claimed were from nonprofit work. The way she always dodged questions about her early life. I felt sick. "So none of it was real," I said. "It became real," she whispered. "I didn't expect that. But it did. You did." I wanted to scream, to throw something through the wall, but I didn't. I just stared at her. I had married a fabrication, loved a ghost, built a life with a weapon trained to manipulate me. And still, the worst part was how much I still wanted her to explain it all away, to tell me there had been a mistake. Then came the crack. A gunshot. Outside. Close. We both dropped instantly. Her instinctive roll across the floor told me this wasn't the first time she'd been hunted. She pulled the Glock from the bag and tossed it to me without hesitation. "They found me," she said. "Which means now they've found you." We were both breathing hard, backs pressed against opposite walls. I looked down at the gun in my hand, then back at the woman who was no longer my wife. My voice came out cold, controlled. "Then we end this. Tonight." When Camilla opened the motel door, everything slowed for half a second. My hand stayed loose by my side, just inches from the pistol tucked under my jacket. Her eyes, those same dark, unreadable eyes I'd memorized over coffee spoons and morning routines, were wide with a strange mix of fear and calculation. Not panic, not surprise. Just a keen awareness, like she was already 3 moves into the next strategy. She didn't speak at first. Just looked at me like I was a ghost from the life she'd buried and half expected to claw its way back. "Marcus," she said finally, her voice rough. "How did you find me?" "I designed security systems for billionaires and governments," I said, brushing past her into the room. "You think I wouldn't track you?" I half expected her to slam the door behind me or yell or reach for a weapon. She didn't. She let the door close quietly, like we were 2 spouses having a quiet fight over dinner plans. The motel room was bleak. Gray wallpaper peeling at the edges, a desk with one shaky leg, and a lamp that flickered when the air conditioner sputtered to life. But what stopped me cold was the side on the bed, neatly laid out like items for a mission briefing. Bundles of cash, a few passports, a burner phone, and a loaded Glock. I stared at the gun for a long moment, then looked back at her. "Going somewhere?" She didn't answer. Not at first. She sat on the corner of the bed, her spine rigid. "I wasn't sure how long I had," she said quietly, "but I knew it wouldn't be long." "You left your children in a house with a dead man," I snapped. "You disappeared and hoped what? That the truth would bury itself?" "No," she said, eyes flashing. "I hoped I could contain it before they got to you." "They." She met my stare. "The Grove." The name hung in the air like a curse. It meant nothing to me in that moment, but something in the way she said it, careful, clipped, told me it should. She reached into the duffel bag, slowly, showing both hands like I was already judging her through a scope. She pulled out a folded document, slid it across the chip table toward me. I opened it. Dossiers. Surveillance photos. A family tree. Mine. I was planted, Marcus, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. The marriage. The house. Even the kids, at least, the start of it. You were the target. You expect me to believe that? I growled. You carried my children. You built a life with me. It became real, she said, voice trembling. Eventually, it did. I didn't plan for that. I was just supposed to observe, keep you stable, make sure you never got too close to what your father left behind. I stiffened. My father? She nodded slowly. You think he died of a stroke, right? Natural causes. Except it wasn't. It was chemical poisoned. Because he was a federal agent embedded in the Grove's infrastructure. They took him out. And you were next. I sat down, hard, like the weight of the lie finally cracked my knees. I'd mourned my father for years. A quiet man. Former customs enforcement. The kind who taught you how to make a fire and never spoke much at dinner. I never thought to question his death. Never thought to ask why he'd been nervous the last few months before it happened. The headaches. The paranoia. The final phone call I missed. I had let it all fade. They wanted access, she said. To your tech. Your mind. Renshield was the perfect doorway. A security empire with access to private government networks and corporate vaults. And Elias? I said, voice low. The man dead in my house, was he in on it too? She nodded. He was my handler. He kept me focused. Delivered instructions. And when he outlived his usefulness? She paused. They silenced him. It wasn't me, Marcus. I swear to you. They're tying up every loose end, and now that you know, you're one too. I stood again, pacing, hard hammering like a drum in my chest. Everything I knew about my life had shifted in a matter of days. My wife, my partner for over 20 years, had been a planted operative. My children were born into a lie. My father had been murdered. My company was a target. The urge to punch a hole in the wall was strong, but I clenched my fists and forced the fury down into my gut. Then came the sharp crack of a gunshot from outside. Both of us dropped to the ground instinctively. Camilla rolled toward the duffel bag, pulling the Glock and sliding it toward me. No hesitation. No explanation. Just muscle memory and cold, trained coordination. I caught it mid-slide, adrenaline burning like acid in my veins. She crawled to the window, lifted the edge of the curtain by 2 inches. One black SUV. 2 men approaching. Armed. No insignia. I looked at her. They followed you. She looked back. They followed you. I burned my trail 2 days ago. We were silent for a moment. Both of us crouched low, like animals sensing the hunter's breath on our necks. And for the first time, I believed her, not because I wanted to, but because fear had burned the falsehoods from her eyes. What do we do? I asked. You get out, she said. You take Silas and Mira and go. You go dark. I'm not leaving you. She looked at me, almost pitying. I'm already gone, Marcus. I was gone the moment I stepped into your life with a script in my back pocket. You think that means nothing? It means everything, she whispered. More footsteps outside. I heard boots crunching gravel. A voice muttering something into a radio. We had seconds. Maybe less. Camilla stood, leaned in close, and touched my cheek, the same way she had 1,000 times before morning coffee. If you ever loved me, she said, then trust me now. This room's compromised. I stared at her, seeing not my wife, not the liar, but the weapon underneath. The one who was now pointed in the same direction I was. Together, we burst through the back door, disappearing into the night. We didn't speak as we ran. The rain was steady now, not torrential, but enough to turn the motel's gravel alley into slick patches of mud. Camilla led the way like she'd rehearsed it 100 times, cutting behind a row of dumpsters, scaling a short retaining wall, and ducking into the overgrown trees bordering the back lot. I followed close, my breath shallow, the Glock tight in my grip. 2 minutes ago, I'd stared at this woman and seen a stranger. Now, under the threat of whoever was hunting us, she was moving like a soldier, and I was running like my life depended on her instincts. We crouched behind a rusted-out truck in the adjacent lot, both of us dripping. My heart was still racing, but I could hear the rhythm of her breathing, measured, quiet, efficient. She peeked between the tailgate and the passenger door, then turned to me. They'll fan out and sweep. They won't shoot unless cornered. They want to confirm what I gave Elias before they kill me. And what did you give Elias? I asked, my voice low but sharp. Insurance. A list of Grove operatives, offshore accounts, recordings. He was planning to sell it back to them, she said bitterly. He got greedy. Thought he had leverage. So you gave him real ammo? I gave him just enough to get himself killed. I stared at her, unsure if I wanted to curse her or thank her. And now they think I have it. You probably do, she muttered. He had copies. Redundancy was his only redeeming quality. Where? I don't know. But I know who can find it. We waited another minute, then slipped down the embankment to a drainage tunnel that emptied beneath the highway. We moved like shadows, emerging on the other side near a commercial park where streetlights buzzed against the mist. Camilla flagged a cab using a burner phone. She wiped her face once before she turned to me again. We have to disappear tonight. You, me, and the kids. I shook my head. No. Mira and Silas stay put. Under police watch. You don't go near them again until I know they're safe. She opened her mouth like she might argue, but then she closed it, gave a single nod. Okay. But you'll need help, Marcus. You can't do this alone. She was right. That's when I called Darius Black. Darius wasn't listed in any phone book. No digital footprint, no tax filings. He didn't exist unless you knew where to look, and I did. Years ago, I'd hired him for a job involving a tech leak at a political campaign. He fixed it within 48 hours and left nothing but silence behind him. He owed me a favor, one I hoped hadn't expired. I sent a single text to a number I kept in a separate notebook, calling in the favor. Urgent. Redline. That was our code. Redline meant eyes on my family. He replied within minutes. Location. Camilla and I caught a ride to his secondary apartment I kept under a shell name, listed as a testing facility for Rentshield's offline prototypes. It had its own power grid, no cameras except my own, and a dozen contingency supplies. Mira and Silas had never even been told it existed. The second we walked in, Camilla scanned the place with those razor-sharp eyes, assessing corners, entry points, potential exits. She didn't ask why I had a safe house. I didn't ask how she knew how to sweep one. By the time Darius arrived, the adrenaline had settled just enough for me to feel my bones aching. He walked in wearing a charcoal coat, gloves, and that same amused frown he always wore when the situation was worse than expected. Marcus, he said, not unkindly. You look like someone dropped your life off a cliff. Feels about right. His eyes flicked to Camilla. Ah, the ghost wife. She didn't flinch. You must be Darius Black. I am. You're either the most dangerous woman in this room or the most screwed. I haven't decided yet. Camilla smirked. Can it be both? He gave a humorless chuckle. I like her. Darius wasted no time. Within 20 minutes, he had traced the Grove's recent activity. 7 bodies in the past 3 weeks. All classified as accidental or self-inflicted. All had ties to Elias or to financial entities supporting the Grove's operations. The pattern was clear. They're cleaning house, Darius said, confirming Camilla's earlier warning. Anyone tied to Elias or to you is a target. That includes your children. I looked at Camilla. What did you bring into our lives? She didn't answer. She didn't need to. Darius pulled up a map. The Grove's digital infrastructure is decentralized, but their logistics base is tied to a foundation, Artisan's Reach. Supposedly a global arts and education initiative. Real purpose? Art fraud, intelligence harvesting, and political blackmail. Camilla? I asked. She nodded. That's where I was trained. They took orphans, runaways, prodigies. Shaped us. I was meant to get close to you, to control you if necessary. Your father's legacy made you a person of interest before you even knew it. And Elias? She looked down. He started out loyal. Then he got sloppy. Started skimming off the top. That's when I knew he was going to die. Darius leaned back. You're a walking liability, Camilla. The only reason I'm not turning you over is because you're also the only one who can crack Elias's dead man switch. What do you mean? I asked. Darius tossed a flash drive onto the table. This surfaced 2 hours ago. Encrypted. But the signal it came from was registered to a burner Elias used. Camilla's hands trembled for the first time. He did it. He uploaded it. What is it? I asked. She stared at the flash drive. It's enough to expose them all. I looked at her, then at Darius. My entire life had been rewritten in days. My wife was a plant. My children were in danger. And somewhere in the wreckage, a man I despised might have just given me the last piece of leverage I needed to blow this entire thing open. But I didn't trust Camilla. Not fully. And I didn't believe she'd told me everything. Before we do anything else, I said, picking up the flash drive, we take control of this. We hit them before they hit us. Camilla met my eyes. Then you'll need bait. I raised a brow. You volunteering? She nodded once. If we want to end this, we draw them out. Somewhere remote. Somewhere I can give them just enough hope to show their faces. I know just the place, I said. My lake house. The lake house sat on 12 secluded acres in northern Vermont, a place so far off the grid it didn't exist on public property records, not under my name. Anyway, I'd bought it 5 years earlier through a shell company, meant to be a backup location for high-profile clients who needed temporary shelter. Mira and Silas had never been there. Camilla had, once, years ago, before the kids were old enough to ask where we were going. I remember she said it felt like a fairy tale cottage, something out of a story where wolves waited just beyond the trees. Now I understood she wasn't talking about fiction. She had always known monsters were real. Camilla didn't speak on the drive. She stared out the passenger window, her face unreadable, like she was bracing for a war that had already begun. I didn't trust her. Not with my kids. Not with the truth. But I needed her for now. She knew the Grove's movements better than anyone, and she knew how to bait them. What she didn't know was that I had no intention of walking out of this without answers. I was done playing the fool. Done letting her drip-feed me information like I was just another mark. Darius followed us in a separate car, bringing his usual arsenal of surveillance drones, jammers, and tactical gear. He didn't ask questions. He didn't need to. That's what made him effective. He operated with precision, detachment, and one simple rule: protect the client at all costs. For now, the client was me, and by extension, Mira and Silas. That meant Camilla was a variable, one that could be eliminated if necessary. We arrived just before dusk. The sky bled orange over the treetops, the lake reflecting the color like a second sun sinking into the earth. I unlocked the heavy steel-reinforced door, stepped into the cool, dark interior, and let muscle memory guide me to the power panel. Lights flickered on. The place smelled like cedar and dust. Nothing had changed. Still 2 floors, wide open central space, and escape hatches hidden behind furniture I had installed myself. Camilla walked in slowly, scanning everything, then turned to me. "You haven't brought anyone else here?" I didn't answer. That was confirmation enough. Darius set up shop in the back room, assembling a surveillance array from what looked like a set of ordinary luggage cases. He moved like a surgeon, precise, efficient, clinical. In less than an hour, we had eyes on every approach to the property and a 3-layer defense grid. Motion sensors. Heat tracking. A signal-dampening field to block outside communication once it was time. He looked at me when it was done. "They'll come. You sure she's paid enough?" I glanced at Camilla. She had changed into a black thermal suit, her hair pulled back into a tight knot, face scrubbed clean of anything resembling domesticity. She looked nothing like my wife. She looked like a field operative preparing for her final act. "She's all we've got," I said. Darius nodded, his meaning clear. "All right. But don't forget who she is." Night fell fast. In the silence between our footsteps, I could feel something rising inside me, a cold clarity I hadn't known I was capable of. This wasn't just about survival anymore. This was about reclaiming every piece of myself that had been quietly stripped away. My name, my trust, my family, my father. Camilla sat at the wooden dining table and pulled a small flash drive from her pocket, the one Elias had hidden before his death. She slid it toward me. "Everything's on here. Codes, names, bank trails. The last few years of the Grove's movements." "You didn't mention this before," I said, not hiding my suspicion. "I needed to know you wouldn't hand it over to someone else before I could help you use it." "And why would I need your help?" "Because they change their protocols every 6 weeks. You won't even get past the first encryption layer without the key, and I'm the key." I looked down at the flash drive, then pocketed it. "After tonight, you're gone. You understand that, right?" She nodded. "That's always been the plan." I didn't say what I was thinking, that I'd believed her before. Believed her when she smiled over breakfast, when she whispered "I love you" in the dark, when she held our children like they were her world. And all along, she'd been planting traps and reporting in. I didn't say it, but she knew. I could see it in the way her shoulders drooped for a second too long. Darius interrupted. "Movement. 2 vehicles. Black SUVs, no plates, coming down the access trail. ETA for minutes." My pulse steadied. It always did when things got real. Camilla stood. "I'll take the porch." I followed her to the front door, checked my sidearm, and nodded. "No sudden moves. If they take you, we follow. If they try to kill you, then they'll try to kill you too," she finished. "This isn't a rescue mission. It's an execution." She walked out onto the porch, her posture casual, like she was waiting for a guest. The headlights grew closer, then cut out. The sound of gravel crunching under boots followed. Darius's voice crackled in my earpiece. 3 targets. 1 driver stays behind. 2 men stepped into the moonlight, black jackets, military posture, suppressed weapons at their sides. One of them raised a hand. Camilla Ward? That's right. Where's the asset? She smiled coolly. Inside. The first man moved forward. Camilla didn't flinch. Elias gave me the last drive, she said. If you kill me, the content goes public. If you take me, I'll give you half. The second man stepped into view, weapon rising. We're not here to negotiate. Then all hell broke loose. Gunfire cracked through the trees. Darius took out the driver before he could radio. I hit the porch light switch, triggering the flashbang rig hidden in the ceiling fixture. Both men staggered. Camilla ducked low, rolled behind the column. I opened fire, 2 controlled shots. 1 down. The second tried to retreat, too late. Darius flanked him. Neutralized. Silence fell like a curtain. Camilla stood slowly, brushing dust off her arms. I walked over to her. Still want to run back to them? No, she said, her voice quiet. I think I'm done running. She reached into her pocket and handed me a second flash drive. This will expose the leadership. Everyone at the top. Use it. And what about you? I asked. She met my eyes. After this, you won't see me again. I didn't speak. I just nodded. As we set fire to the SUV and wiped the site clean, she turned one last time toward the lake, toward the house, and whispered, "Tell the kids, it wasn't all fake." Then she disappeared into the woods as the flames rose behind her. The lake house still smelled like fire the next morning. Charred rubber and oil clung to the dew-covered grass. I stood alone on the back porch, arms crossed, watching smoke curl in thin threads from the remains of the SUV we'd torched the night before. Ash drifted across the lake in soft spirals, disappearing into the fog. Camilla was gone. Darius had vanished too, off to chase down more leads with the digital payload she'd given us. And me? I was left with a lie that had bled into every corner of my life, and a decision I couldn't unmake. I called Silas first. He answered on the second ring. "Dad?" His voice cracked. "They're okay," I said, cutting to the chase. "We're okay. Are you still with the agents?" "Yeah. They're not letting us out of their sight. Myris, she hasn't said much. Keeps asking where Mom is." I closed my eyes, feeling that knot tighten again beneath my sternum. "I'll tell you everything soon. I promise. Just sit tight. One more day." There was silence on the line for a long beat. Then Silas said, "You'll come back, right?" "I'm coming back," I told him. No matter what. After we hung up, I stared at the woods where Camilla had disappeared. I knew she was still alive. Someone like her doesn't die easily. And part of me knew she'd always find a way to stay one step ahead, disappearing into shadows while the rest of us struggled with the debris she left behind. But I also knew something else. She had given me the key. The second flash drive. The one that exposed the Grove's leadership. If the data was real, and so far everything Camilla had handed over had checked out, it would burn through the rot at the heart of this whole thing like acid through steel. I packed up everything. The lake house, once a sanctuary, was now compromised. I ran a scrambler through the network to erase all logs, set a timed pulse to fry the hard drives, and disabled every sensor and security node. If they came back, they'd find a ghost town. I loaded what I needed into the trunk of my car and took one last look at the place. It had kept us alive. It had done its job. Now it was time for mine. The drive back to Boston was long and quiet. I didn't turn on the radio, didn't make calls. My head was too full. Camilla's words replaying in an endless loop, Darius's maps, the Grove's name scrawled across documents I hadn't yet shown the authorities. I had work to do. Work that couldn't be trusted to anyone else. When I pulled up outside the Renshield corporate building, it was just past noon. The place looked the same, glass and steel reflecting a perfect sky, but I saw it differently now. This wasn't just my company anymore. It was the last piece of leverage I had. The access point. The distribution hub. The gate between the Grove's secrets and the world. Inside, my executive assistant, Rachel, blinked in surprise when I walked past without a word. I hadn't been in the building in almost a week. People were starting to ask questions. I walked straight into my office, closed the blinds, and pulled out the flash drive. It took 15 minutes to crack the first layer of encryption. Not because I was slow, but because Camilla had built it to resist even my software. That was her way of making sure it got into the right hands, and not the wrong ones. Once inside, the file names said everything. Red Sparrow, Deadhead, Warden Gate. Familiar code names in the security world, all whispered and disavowed by people who swore they didn't exist. One folder labeled Monarch caught my attention. Inside it, video files, transcripts, surveillance logs, and names. Senators, CEOs, judges, foreign diplomats, all tied to shell companies that funneled millions into an arts foundation that Camilla had once called her first employer. I watched as one video showed Elias sitting in a high-rise office with two of those politicians, laughing, trading folders, shaking hands. The timestamp was 2 years ago. One of those politicians had recently died of natural causes. Another was currently leading a cybersecurity bill through Congress. The implications were devastating. I backed up the files across multiple encrypted drives and prepped 3 separate public dead man's drops. If anything happened to me, the information would go live. I didn't care about the fallout. I cared about the truth. But before I moved forward, there was one thing left to do. I drove out to a safe location Darius had arranged, an old airstrip used by private contractors and decommissioned government aircraft. Mira and Silas were waiting there, standing with a small overnight bag each. They looked exhausted, like they'd been holding their breath since the night the walls of our lives caved in. Camilla was already there too, under the watch of 2 silent guards Darius trusted. She looked different. Not in disguise, not armored up, just still. Like she'd stopped running and was waiting for permission to exhale. She stepped forward. "Please," she said. "Let me say goodbye." I looked at Mira and Silas. Mira nodded slowly. Silas didn't move. "I'll give you 5 minutes," I said. "Then you're gone." Camilla approached Mira first, touching her daughter's cheek. Mira trembled, tears escaping. "Were you ever really our mom?" she whispered. Camilla's reply was soft. "Yes, that part was real." Then she turned to Silas. He didn't speak. He just stared at her, jaw clenched. After a long pause, he nodded once. Camilla looked at me. "What now?" "Now," I said. "You vanish. You don't contact them again. Ever. And if you do, if I even sense your shadow near them, I won't be so merciful." She nodded. "I know." I watched as she stepped into the waiting vehicle and pulled away. No theatrics. No last-minute tears. Just silence and disappearing taillights. Mira gripped my hand. "Dad, is it over?" I looked up at the sky. "Not yet. But it's close." I was done playing defense. Now, it was time to expose them all. The morning after Camilla's final goodbye, I woke in the safe house with a jolt that felt like the aftershock of a war that had only paused, not ended. Sunlight filtered through bulletproof glass, a muted gold that offered no warmth, just clarity. Mira was asleep on the couch, wrapped in one of my jackets. Silas sat at the kitchen table, fully dressed, staring into a cup of untouched coffee like he was trying to read it for answers. His face was older now, harder. The boy who once begged me to teach him how to ride a bike was gone. In his place sat a young man trying to make sense of a world that had lied to him in every language it knew. I sat across from him, no words exchanged for a moment. Just silence. Heavy. Unforgiving. "I couldn't sleep," he said eventually. I still locked on the cup. "Every time I close my eyes, I see her face. Not the one from the motel. The old one. Before all this. The one who used to pack my lunch and sneak chocolate in the side pocket." I nodded, unsure whether to speak or just let him have the air. He looked up. "She lied to us." "She did." But he paused. What if part of it was real? My throat tightened. I'd asked myself the same question too many times, pacing rooms, watching surveillance footage that now looked more like theater than memory. "Maybe it was," I said. "Maybe not. Either way, she's gone. And we're still here." He nodded, jaw flexing. "Then let's do something with it." By mid-morning, Darius arrived with news. The flash drive Camilla left had been verified, cross-referenced, matched against dormant intel sources the government had buried under sealed records. This wasn't theory anymore, it was fact. The Grove wasn't just a rogue operation. It was embedded, infiltrated across politics, finance, education, even private humanitarian efforts. 3 sitting senators, 1 Supreme Court justice. For CEOs of Fortune 500 companies. The connective tissue was a tangled knot of art fraud, human intelligence operations, and backdoor lobbying. The data on the drive didn't just expose the Grove structure, It implicated them in everything from foreign election interference to staged diplomatic scandals. We had enough to bring the walls down. Darius looked at me across the war table we'd set up in the middle of the room. Once this goes live, there's no coming back. I'm not coming back, I said. They took my father. They used my wife. They threatened my kids. I'm not stopping until there's nothing left of them. He nodded, then turned to the laptop. We have 3 safe release vectors. Whistleblower media channels, international watchdogs, and 1 federal task force with a grudge. Who gets it first? I pointed to all 3. Simultaneous. We hit them from every angle. What about your name? You want to be credited? No, I said. I want to disappear when this is over. Just like her. Darius paused. Speaking of which, we got a signal ping. Brief. Untraceable, but encrypted using a signature Camilla used 2 years ago. I froze. What did it say? He hesitated. Then read. For what it's worth, I never stopped loving them. Silas, who had been leaning against the wall, scoffed. That's supposed to mean something? I looked at him, my heart a twisting storm. Maybe not. But we don't let her ghost slow us down. The next 48 hours moved like a storm surge. First came the media firestorm, leaked documents flooding whistleblower outlets, op-eds dissecting photos of handshakes between known Grove assets and national leaders. Then came the political denials, the stammering press conferences, the urgent resignations disguised as personal sabbaticals. Then came the arrests. The FBI moved on domestic names. Interpol tracked international accounts. A Supreme Court justice went quiet, citing health concerns, and vanished from public record within 3 days. 1 senator was found dead in a hotel room in Prague. Another tried to board a jet in Zurich and was intercepted mid-tarmac. He reportedly wept as they pulled him away. Silas and Mira watched the news with a mixture of horror and grim satisfaction. Mira cried when she saw one of the funders of her former internship program arrested. Silas, quieter, just turned the TV off and said, "It's not enough. Not yet." And he was right, because there were still pieces missing. The ones who had ordered my father's death. The ones who had green-lit Camilla's mission. They hadn't surfaced. But I had names. 3, to be exact. They weren't famous. That's what made them dangerous. They worked beneath the radar. One ran a shell investment firm in Zurich, another handled Grove's cleaner contracts, and the third operated out of a university think tank in Brussels, where policy and manipulation intersected in backdoor salons. I didn't go after them with weapons. I went after them with time. One by one, I dismantled their lives. Froze accounts. Exposed emails. Leaked damning phone calls. And for the final one, the Zurich operator, I ensured every member of his family knew who he really was. I didn't kill them. I made sure they lived long enough to watch their empires rot. When the dust settled, the Grove was no longer a whisper. It was a headline, but I stayed quiet. My name never surfaced. My face never showed. I gave Darius one final handshake. We're done. For now, he said. Until the next storm. I flew Mira and Silas out on a private flight under new names, new documents, new lives. We landed in New Zealand, Wellington, a city by the sea, tucked far enough away from the wreckage we left behind. The house I bought was modest. Clean. Quiet. Security was tight, but not obvious. Just enough to keep ghosts out. Mira enrolled in school. She smiled again. Slowly. Like someone learning to trust the sun again. Silas joined a local rugby team. He kept to himself. But every once in a while, he'd look up from a book and say something that reminded me he hadn't forgotten. Neither had I. As for Camilla, no one had heard from her. But I knew better. I knew she was out there. Somewhere. Watching. Regretting. Maybe not. Some nights, when the wind comes in off the harbor and everything is still, I sit by the window and wonder, was any of it ever real? The laughter. The anniversaries. The way she hummed when she washed the dishes. Did she love me? Or just the mission? I'll never know. But I do know this. They chose the wrong man to manipulate. And they paid for it. I didn't watch the first wave of news live. I already knew what it would say. The morning our files dropped, the internet cracked open like a fault line. Social media turned into a wildfire. Whistleblower platforms went into overdrive. Reddit threads connected dots faster than analysts. But none of it mattered until I saw that first name scroll across a breaking news banner on CNN, Senator William Horn. And just like that, the storm was public. I stood in the kitchen of our house in Wellington, watching through a half-full mug of coffee as the world caught up to what we already knew. Silas entered the room mid-report, reading texts on his phone, eyes sharp. Mira trailed behind, slower, more guarded. "They're saying Senator Horn took hush money from an art foundation," Silas said, sitting across from me. "They don't even realize yet that it's the Grove." "They will," I replied. "They just need time to admit how deep it goes." Time was something I had spent a lifetime weaponizing, learning how to wait, when to act, when to disappear. Now I watched the machine unravel. By noon, 3 more names had surfaced. Evelyn Marston, head of the Marston Foundation, who laundered Grove money through education grants. Jeffrey Callan, tech billionaire and donor to multiple surveillance contracts, who'd given the Grove infrastructure through his backdoors. And Judge Harold Lynn, who had ruled in favor of corporate immunity cases tied directly to Grove shell companies. All exposed. All on camera. All denying, stumbling, stammering. I didn't smile. Not once. Because this wasn't revenge. This was revelation. And that's colder. Harder. Deeper. I used to believe justice came in courtrooms and verdicts. But after what happened to my father, after what Camilla confessed, I understood, justice lives in shadows too. Sometimes it's a quiet hand tipping the first domino. Sometimes it's truth dressed in silence. 2 days later, the suicides began. Jeffrey Callan was found in his Cayman Islands estate, overdose. No note. No statement. Senator Horn checked himself into a medical retreat that didn't exist in any public directory. Evelyn Marston's jet attempted a sudden departure from a private airfield in Luxembourg, but was stopped mid-taxi. She's been in federal custody ever since. Refuses to speak. Her foundation has been dissolved. The Grove as an entity couldn't survive the exposure. Not in the way it had before. Their websites vanished, their offices restructured, their operatives, those still alive, scattered. Some turned on each other. Some tried to make deals. I leaked just enough to ensure none of them slept easy again. And the ones behind my father's death? There were 3 names Camilla never gave me, but I found them. I knew how to follow money now. I knew what words to look for in contracts, what emails to decrypt. I traced one to a think tank in Brussels, Dr. Peter Lamb, who presented himself as a policy expert on national security, but who, behind closed doors, approved targets for elimination. He's still alive. But his name, reputation, and every consulting contract he held are ashes now. I didn't use a weapon. I used his own words, his own arrogance. The documents I found in Elias's second cache had him recorded during a loyalty audit meeting, calmly authorizing my father's death because he'd strayed from mission protocol. I sent the file to 5 journalists anonymously. Then I sent it to his wife. Let him live with that. The second man, Jacques Moreau, operated through finance channels in the Middle East. A quiet man. Untraceable until I traced him. I hacked a Grove terminal left unattended during one of the raids. Found a message trail between Moreau and a Brazilian fixer. 2 weeks later, Moreau was arrested in Lisbon with a forged Monaco passport and $8.2 million in diamonds in his luggage. They thought he was fleeing extradition. I made sure Interpol had the right tip. One left. His name was Richard Wexley, a name buried so deep it didn't appear in any Grove document. But Camilla had left a clue, one last breadcrumb in her flash drive, a photograph. A man shaking Elias's hand. Background blurred, but the Grove's crest was stitched on the wall behind them. It took Darius weeks to run facial reconstruction on the image. When he found a match, I felt something in my chest go still. Richard Wexley wasn't a politician. He wasn't even a Grove director. He was a former intelligence analyst who retired 2 years before my father's death and started working as a private consultant for intelligence firms. His clients were all Grove adjacent. His signature was found in the deletion logs of my father's federal personnel file. I flew to Madrid, where he lived quietly in a villa by the coast. I didn't confront him. I didn't need to. I simply let him see me, standing outside his favorite cafe, ordering an espresso, looking him in the eye. No threats. No words. Just acknowledgement. He didn't return to that cafe the next day. Or the next. 3 weeks later, he checked himself into a private clinic for paranoia and cognitive breakdown. I didn't visit. He'd lived long enough to feel what my father felt before the end. Fear, silence, and the sense that someone was always watching. That's justice too. By the time winter settled over Wellington, Mira was thriving again, back in university, building a life in art and design that had nothing to do with espionage, betrayal, or buried bodies. She still asked about Camilla sometimes, but less often now, like the scar was healing, even if it never vanished. Silas was quieter. He trained harder with rugby, studied longer, and once told me, "I still don't know who to trust." I told him, "Start with yourself. The rest comes later." As for me, I rebuilt. Friendshield was gone. I dissolved it after we went dark. I now consulted anonymously, under aliases, building security systems for people who needed safety more than status. My name wasn't known. My fingerprints were wiped. I became what they thought they were hunting. Invisible, untouchable, unstoppable. I thought of Camilla sometimes. Wondered if she made it out. Wondered if she looked over her shoulder the way I did. Wondered if the love she claimed was ever more than strategy. I don't think I'll ever know. But I know this. Every monster has a master. Every web has a sinner. And every lie, eventually, comes unraveled. They thought they could use me. They thought I was just another cog, another soft target, another man asleep at the wheel. They thought wrong. The plane touched down in Wellington beneath a blanket of soft clouds, the kind that made the city feel like a secret even the sky wasn't sure it should keep. I watched from my window seat as Mira leaned forward, her eyes wide with cautious wonder, while Silas pressed his forehead against the glass, silent, taking everything in. We didn't speak much on the flight. We hadn't needed to. After everything, silence had become its own kind of language. One made up of side glances, squeezed hands, and the mutual understanding that we were starting over not because we wanted to, but because we had to. We arrived at the small house an hour later. It sat near the coast, the Pacific not far beyond the tree line, with soft gray siding and a wraparound porch that creaked when you walked too fast. I'd bought it under a new name, Michael Ellis, a retired consultant. The neighbors wouldn't ask questions. They were the kind of people who respected privacy the way others respected religion. The first few weeks were strange. Not quiet, exactly, but unfamiliar. Mira set up her art supplies in the converted garage, painting at odd hours of the night. I'd hear her moving around just before dawn, her brush tapping gently against canvas while music played low and wordless. Silas joined a local rugby club, waking early, training hard. I drove into practice sometimes, the two of us sitting in comfortable silence, the bond between us still taut but slowly mending. I spent my days rebuilding, not just emotionally, but professionally. Under a different identity, I took on selective freelance work, designing bespoke security systems for NGOs, remote research stations, even private family estates that needed to vanish off the grid. I made my new job building doors that couldn't be found and walls that couldn't be breached. Every line of code I wrote was a fortress. Every protocol I installed was a promise to Mira, to Silas, and to myself. What I didn't do was talk about Camilla. She was gone. No confirmed sightings. No signal pings. No emails. Not even a whisper in the shadow channels Darius still monitored. Either she was dead, or she was doing what she'd been trained to do, disappear completely. Most days I told myself I didn't care. I'd made my peace. But some nights, when the wind came in cold off the coast, and I couldn't sleep, I'd stand at the kitchen sink, stare into the dark, and feel that nagging question press into my ribs. Did she ever love us? Was any of it real? I remembered the way she used to hum while washing the dishes. The way she kept every birthday card we ever gave her in a small wooden box. The way she cried when Silas broke his arm and had to get pins. Were those instincts? Or were they emotions she never planned to have? It didn't matter, I told myself. Not anymore. We survived. That was enough. And still, some part of me, some small, foolish part, hoped she meant it when she said she loved them. That even if the mission had ended, some piece of her stayed. Around the third month, Mira asked to visit a local museum where they were showcasing Pacific art installations. I took her on a Saturday afternoon, just the two of us. We walked quietly, her hand wrapped around my elbow like she used to when she was small. We stood before a sculpture made of driftwood and shattered mirror glass. She looked up at me and whispered, "I think I'm finally starting to breathe again." I nodded, unable to speak. Silas came home one evening with a scraped elbow and a grin that reached all the way to his eyes. He dropped his gear bag by the door, opened the fridge, and shouted, "We out of milk?" It was the most normal thing I'd heard in months. I almost laughed. I wanted to. On the rare occasion Darius checked in, his messages were short. No threats. Channels quiet. All clear. We didn't say much beyond that. We didn't need to. One night, I sat alone on the porch with a glass of scotch, the waves rolling softly beyond the trees. The stars were bright, brighter than I remembered. I leaned back in the chair, closed my eyes, and let the cold air sting my lungs. For once, I felt something close to peace. Not quite forgiveness, not quite closure, but something in between. I thought about my father, about the life he never got to live, about the warnings I never heard and the strength I didn't know I had. I thought about what it meant to lose everything and still find the will to protect what remained. And then I thought about Camilla, the woman, the weapon, the ghost. I didn't know where she was. I didn't know who she was anymore. But I did know this. She underestimated me. They all did. They thought I was soft, predictable, a pawn in a game too big for me to grasp. But they were wrong. I rebuilt my life from nothing. I protected my children from the world's worst intentions. I burned down an empire not with bullets, but with truth. And when the dust settled, I was still standing. That's what they never planned for. That's what they didn't see coming. So now here we are. A new life, a new name, and a future no one else wrote for us. I may never know if any of it was real, but what I do know is this. I'm free, and they'll never touch us again.